Welcome to the channel. Here, we dive deep into powerful books and break down their ideas in a calm, thoughtful way. In today's episode, we explore Malignant Self-Love by Sam Vaknin, a deep and unsettling look into narcissism, identity, and the inner world behind one of the most complex personality structures. If you enjoy clear, thought-provoking breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for more.
Have you ever encountered someone who completely derailed your reality?
Like just entirely shifted your perception of what is real and what isn't.
Exactly. I want you to think about it for a second. Someone who, at first, built you up to feel like the absolute center of the universe.
Right, like they were your savior.
Yeah, your best friend, the only person in the world who truly, got you.
The ultimate soulmate connection.
Exactly. And then, out of nowhere, they just ruthlessly tore you down.
Leaving you basically standing in the rubble of the relationship.
Right. And you're left there genuinely questioning your own sanity.
It's a deeply, deeply disorienting experience. I mean, you're left holding the pieces of a psychological bomb that just went off.
And without any apparent tripwire.
Exactly. Yeah. But when you look closely at the architecture of that bomb, you start to realize it wasn't a malfunction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was designed to do exactly that.
That's chilling. And usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis or, a psychological condition, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Right, like a tangible test you can run.
Yeah, you break your arm, the x-ray shows the jagged white line, the doctor points and says, there it is.
But with cluster B personality disorders, that doesn't really work.
No, especially not with narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. That x-ray machine is completely useless.
Because we're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely behavioral.
Right, it's subjective, and it's hidden behind this mask of absolute perfection.
Which makes getting to the truth of it almost impossible. Well, unless the mask completely shatters.
Exactly. Which brings us to our source material for today's deep dive.
We have a really rare look behind that mask today.
We do, because we actually have a first-hand concession. The excerpts we're exploring today come from a book called Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited by Sam Vaknin.
And, the context of how this book came to be is just as crucial as the actual psychological concepts inside it.
Oh, the context is everything here. Because Vaknin isn't a clinician who sat in a chair observing patients for 30 years.
No, he was actually diagnosed himself.
Right. And he wrote this book in a jail cell.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. His entire life basically collapsed at the age of 39. I mean, he had built up this massive empire of intellect and finance.
And he just destroyed it all.
Completely. His finances, his family, his reputation, everything burned to the ground.
And in that absolute isolation of a prison environment, where he was stripped of his status and his money.
And his audience, most importantly.
Right, the mask failed. He suffered what we in the clinical world call a narcissistic collapse.
And from that rubble, he essentially put himself under the microscope. He wanted to figure out his own diagnosis.
That prison environment is so key to understanding this. Mm-hmm. Because for a narcissist, the external world is basically a prop room.
A prop room, I like that.
Yeah, and when you take away the props, the bespoke suits, the bank accounts, the sycophants, you force an encounter with the internal void.
Wow. So Vaknin's text is it's almost like an autopsy of his own psychological machinery.
Exactly. But while he was still alive, to feel the cuts. And he doesn't write this to elicit sympathy, by the way.
No, not at all. It reads like an anatomical breakdown of a predator.
Written by the predator.
Yes, explaining exactly how he hunts. And his opening confession in the text, it just drops you right into the middle of that hunt.
He's remarkably candid right from the jump.
He is. He writes directly to the reader, laying out the exact mechanism of the idealization phase.
The love bombing phase, basically.
Right. He says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he says, I am your inspiration, your role model, your savior, your leader, your best friend.
He claims to be the one who finally saw you for what you really are.
Yes. And the mechanism there is it's profound.
Because people often mistake this idealization phase for intense love or, infatuation.
Sure, it feels like a fairy tale.
But neurologically and psychologically, what the narcissist is doing is running a highly sophisticated scanning algorithm.
Wait, a scanning algorithm? Like they're data mining you.
That is the perfect way to phrase it, yeah. Because they lack a solid internal core, they have to construct a bespoke personality that perfectly locks into your specific missing pieces.
Oh, wow. So they're looking for your vulnerability.
Exactly. They are scanning your insecurities, your unfulfilled desires, your parental wounds.
And then what? They just exploit them.
Well, first, they mirror them back to you as strengths.
That is wild. So if you felt unheard as a child, they suddenly become the greatest listener on earth.
Precisely. They hang on your every word.
And if you feel intellectually inadequate, they position themselves as this brilliant mentor who recognizes your, hidden genius.
Right. You feel like you've met your absolute soulmate.
But really, you've just met a perfectly calibrated reflection of your own unmet needs.
And the thing is, that reflection requires an immense amount of cognitive energy to maintain.
I mean, I can't imagine keeping up an act like that 24/7.
You can't. The narcissist is essentially holding their breath to keep up this flawless performance.
And nobody can hold their breath forever.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which leads us to the inevitable pivot.
The sudden flip. Vaknin writes about this, and this is where it gets genuinely chilling.
The devaluation.
Right. He says, then, out of the blue, I start tearing you down. And he specifies the exact nature of the insults, too.
He goes for the jugular.
He really does. He calls his target incompetent, disrespectful, untrustworthy, ignorant, a social embarrassment.
A financial liability. It's just a sudden, unprovoked barrage of absolute cruelty.
And the victim is left entirely dumbfounded. I mean, wouldn't you be?
Of course. The victim is dumbfounded because they are trying to map this behavior onto a neurotypical template.
Right, like how a normal relationship works.
Exactly. In a healthy relationship, an argument has a discernible cause. Like someone forgot an anniversary or somebody overspent the bank account.
Right, the conflict is anchored in reality. But this devaluation isn't triggered by anything the victim actually did.
Wait, really? It's not about the victim at all.
No, it is triggered by the narcissist's internal exhaustion.
Because they're tired of holding their breath.
Yes, the mask is slipping, their internal shame is bubbling up, and they need to immediately offload that toxic shame onto the closest available target.
Wow. So you are simply the nearest psychological dumpster.
It's harsh, but yes, that's exactly what you are in that moment.
And when the victim tries to defend themselves or, point out that the attack makes absolutely no sense.
That's when they run straight into the gaslighting.
Right. Vaknin admits this openly. He says, I lie to your face without a twitch or a twitter, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
We really need to unpack the mechanics of that gaslighting, because it's fundamentally different from a normal lie.
How so? I mean, a lie is a lie, right?
Not neurologically. When a neurotypical person lies, say they lie about where they were last night, they hold two realities in their head.
Okay, they know the truth and they know the lie.
Exactly. And holding those two conflicting realities creates cognitive dissonance.
Which makes you feel stressed, right?
Yes, it creates physical stress response. Sweating, microexpressions, a rising heart rate.
Like what a polygraph test picks up.
Precisely. But the narcissist doesn't experience cognitive dissonance.
Why not?
Because they literally overwrite their own reality in real time.
Oh, wow. So it's not even a strategy for them.
No, it's confabulation. It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
If their internal narrative requires you to be the villain so that they can remain the flawless victim.
Their brain just retroactively edits their memories to make that true.
Exactly. They believe their own fabrications with absolute terrifying conviction.
That is mind-blowing. And I guess when someone lies to you with zero physiological stress, with the conviction of a religious zealot.
It completely bypasses your own reality testing mechanisms.
Right. You naturally begin to think, well, they are so certain, maybe I am remembering it wrong.
And that's the trap. They weaponize your own empathy and self-reflection against you.
Because a healthy person will inherently question themselves.
Right. Narcissists never questions themselves.
So in that collision, the rigid delusion just always overpowers the flexible, self-reflective reality.
Every single time.
And what if you do manage to hold on to your sanity long enough to seek help? Like, what if you try to expose them to mutual friends or family or even a therapist?
Vaknin explains that he has already neutralized those threats.
Right, the smear campaign. And he initiates it months, sometimes even years before the final discard.
It's a preemptive strike. This is where the structural nature of the pathology becomes highly visible.
So they isolate you by systematically poisoning your support network.
Yes. But they don't do it with obvious malice. That's the tricky part.
How do they do it then?
They do it with feigned concern. They will go to your best friend and sigh, saying, I'm really worried about her lately.
Oh, that makes my skin crawl.
She's been so erratic. Have you noticed she's drinking more? They just plant these tiny, plausible seeds of doubt.
So by the time you finally snap from the hidden abuse, or by the time you go to your friends crying about the cruelty behind closed doors.
Your friends have already been primed with the narrative that you are unstable.
Wow. The narcissist effectively acts as the director, handing out scripts to everyone in your life, casting you as the crazy one.
And Vaknin explicitly says, the more you plead for understanding, the more convinced they will be that you are crazy.
It creates a perfectly sealed echo chamber.
It does. And inside that chamber, what is happening in the narcissist's mind?
Vaknin is incredibly candid here too. He calls his inner life an illusion-clad confusion.
He states, I have no idea why I do what I do, nor do I care to find out.
Which is wild. The mere thought of introspection is repulsive to him.
Because to look inward would mean looking at the void.
Right. They project this image of being the ultimate independent mastermind, the untouchable god of their own universe.
But Vaknin admits he is entirely dependent. He calls himself a people junkie.
You people junkie, that's the paradox, right?
Yeah.
The predator who is completely reliant on their prey.
Absolutely. They project absolute self-sufficiency, but they are psychological parasites.
He talks about this orgasmic release of pain and anger when he rages at a victim.
Right. And that release doesn't happen in a vacuum. You cannot rage at a wall and feel powerful.
You need the wall to cry.
Exactly. You need the wall to look terrified.
Uh,
They require your emotional reaction to validate their existence.
So to borrow an analogy from finance, it operates exactly like a psychological Ponzi scheme.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Think about it. The narcissist has this massive internal debt of shame and emptiness, right?
Right.
So to keep the enterprise from collapsing, they require a constant daily influx of new emotional capital from their investors.
Being their victims.
Yes. They take your admiration, your love, your fear, your tears, and they use it to pay off the internal debt of the false self.
But there's no actual product being generated.
Exactly. The core is completely bankrupt. And the moment you stop investing your emotional energy, the whole scheme collapses into narcissistic rage.
The Ponzi scheme analogy is incredibly precise. Because what happens in a Ponzi scheme when the investors start asking to see the books?
The fraudster attacks the investor becomes the enemy.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really fundamental question.
Which is?
Well, if their entire psychological structure is just a fraudulent enterprise designed to extract emotional capital,
Yeah.
do they even possess a true personality?
Wow. That's a deep question. And to get to the bottom of that, we have to look at the source's philosophical breakdown of identity.
We have to define what a personality actually is versus what is just a defense mechanism.
Right. And Vaknin introduces this concept through a fascinating behavioral study, the lemon experiment.
I love the lemon experiment. It gets right to the neurological roots of how humans interact with their environment.
Can you walk us through it?
Sure. So researchers took a group of students and handed each one a lemon from a massive crate.
Just a regular lemon.
Just a regular lemon. And they were instructed to simply sit with it. Feel the texture of the rind, notice the specific discoloration on one side, smell the oils.
So they formed a sensory baseline with that specific object.
Exactly. Then, 3 days later, the researchers threw all those lemons into a huge pile with hundreds of other identical lemons.
And the students could pick their exact lemon out of the pile.
You did. They literally bonded with a piece of citrus.
That is amazing. And what does that demonstrate?
It demonstrates the human reflexive drive to form habits and attachments to our environment.
Because neurologically, the brain is an energy-saving device, right?
Yes. Constantly processing novel information is exhausting and dangerous. Yeah. So we form habits.
We bond with objects, routines, and people to create a zone of predictability and comfort.
Exactly. Habits are evolutionary adaptations designed to minimize risk.
But the crucial distinction the text makes is that we routinely confuse our habits with our core identity.
We do it all the time. If you ask a person at a dinner party who they are, they don't give you their core identity.
Right. They give you a list of their habits and attachments. They say, I am a corporate lawyer, I'm a marathon runner, I'm a father of two, I love jazz.
Yes, they list their environmental adaptations.
Yes.
But if that person loses their job, blows out their knee and can't run, and goes deaf and can't hear jazz, do they cease to exist?
No, of course not. The core identity remains intact.
Exactly. The true kernel of identity, clinically speaking, is the underlying personality.
And a healthy personality is defined as a loose, interconnected pattern of reactions to a changing environment.
The operative word there being loose, flexible.
Right. A healthy personality can absorb the loss of a habit, It can grieve the loss of the job or the physical ability, and then it recombines its traits to adapt to the new reality.
It bends without breaking.
Which leads us directly to the clinical definition of a personality disorder.
A personality disorder occurs when that structure loses its flexibility. The adaptations become completely calcified.
So the individual literally mistakes their defense mechanisms for their core identity.
Yes, the true self vacates the premises, and all that is left is a rigid shell of habits designed to ward off trauma.
It makes me think of someone who puts on a heavy suit of medieval armor because they were attacked as a child.
That's a really powerful image.
The armor was a necessary adaptation to survive the battlefield of their childhood. But they leave it on for 30, 40 years.
Eventually, the metal fuses to their body.
Right. They forget what their own skin feels like. They think they are the armor.
They can't feel the warmth of the sun. They can't feel the embrace of a loved one. They just feel the cold steel.
And if you, as their partner, try to point out that they have vulnerable skin underneath or suggest they take the helmet off, they perceive it as a lethal threat.
They attack you because without the armor, they believe they will instantly die.
That is so tragic, but it makes perfect sense. And because they are trapped inside that rigid armor, they are incapable of adapting to the changing realities of life.
And life is change. Relationships require compromise.
But the narcissist cannot compromise because to bend the armor is to braid it.
Therefore, since they cannot adapt to the world, they must force the world to adapt to them.
They demand that reality conforms to their delusion.
And this brings us to the most pervasive misunderstanding about this disorder.
You mean the cultural use of the word narcissist?
Exactly. We use it to describe an influencer taking 50 selfies at a restaurant or an actor giving a self-indulgent speech at an awards show.
The colloquial assumption is that a narcissist is someone who is deeply, passionately in love with themselves.
It is a fundamental misreading of the pathology, and it stems from a misreading of the original Greek myth.
Oh, the myth of Narcissus.
Right. Narcissus, the beautiful hunter, did not fall in love with himself.
He fell in love with a reflection.
Exactly. The myth says he rejected everyone around him, specifically the nymph Echo.
Who just repeated his own words back to him, right?
Yes. And the gods punished his arrogance by leading him to a pool of water. He saw his reflection, didn't recognize it as himself, and became hopelessly obsessed with the image.
He starved to death staring at the surface of the water. He loved an avatar.
Precisely. And this is the central architecture of narcissistic personality disorder.
So narcissists don't love themselves.
No, narcissists harbor absolute disdain for their true self.
Wait, really? Disdain?
Yes. Early in their development, they internalized the message that their authentic self was weak, defective, and unlovable.
So they repressed it.
They locked it away in the basement of their psyche. And in its place, they projected a false self.
A grandiose, omnipotent, flawless avatar.
Yes. All of their cognitive energy, all of their love, is directed at maintaining and worshiping that false self.
But because it is a projection, like a hologram, it doesn't have its own mass.
Right, it requires a constant power source to remain visible.
Just like Narcissus needed the water to bounce the light back to his eyes, the modern narcissist needs a mirror. They need an audience.
In clinical terms, this is narcissistic supply.
Right, the supply.
The false self cannot generate its own validation. It relies entirely on external input to verify its existence.
And this is where we have to expand the definition of what supply actually is, don't we? Because people assume it just means praise, adulation, and applause.
Positive supply.
Yeah, exactly.
But negative supply is equally potent, and sometimes they actually prefer it.
Really? Negative supply?
Yes. Fear, notoriety, submission, the ability to inflict pain and watch someone cry. All of this serves the exact same function.
Because it proves they have an impact.
Exactly. If I can make you terrified of me, I have irrefutable proof that I exist and that I am powerful. The reflection in the mirror is sharp and clear.
Oh, wow. This completely reframes how we view their cruelty. It's not just malice for the sake of malice.
No, it's a desperate harvesting of resources.
They're tapping your emotional reserves to keep the hologram running.
And because maintaining a massive, flawless projection requires 100% of their psychological bandwidth, they have absolutely zero energy left over for actual connection.
They lack the cognitive hardware for empathy.
Completely.
Yeah.
Empathy requires you to hold space for another person's internal reality.
Right. You have to recognize them as a distinct three-dimensional entity with their own fears, hopes, and rights.
But to a narcissist, as Vaknin points out, you are not three-dimensional. You are a two-dimensional surface. You are a mirror.
So when the mirror suddenly starts having its own needs, say you get sick or you lose your job or you simply set a boundary and say no, you are no longer reflecting their grandiosity.
You are cloudy.
Yeah. And if you take that a step further, you aren't just a defective mirror in that moment, you are an existential threat.
Yes. By asserting your own humanity, you force them to realize that their control is an illusion. You threaten to expose the false self.
Which induces sheer panic.
Absolute panic.
Yeah.
Which is instantly transmuted into narcissistic rage. They will smash the mirror to punish it for not working.
This philosophical framework is staggering, but I'm curious, how does it actually translate into a clinical setting?
Like, how do psychiatrists measure it?
Exactly. When a doctor sits across from this rigid, reflection-obsessed defense mechanism, what do they look for? Let's move into the diagnostic reality, specifically looking at the DSM criteria.
Okay, so the clinical manuals, the DSM-IVTR, and the ICD-10 mentioned in the source, require a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy.
But we shouldn't view the criteria as just a checklist of bad behaviors, right?
No, we really need to look at the underlying mechanisms they represent.
Right, let's group them organically.
Yeah.
Because several of these criteria essentially describe the mechanics of the false self's grandiosity and entitlement.
For instance, the diagnostic requirement that they harbor a grandiose sense of self-importance.
Where they exaggerate achievements and expect to be recognized as superior without actually doing the work.
Coupled with their obsession with fantasies of unlimited success, power, or brilliance.
So what's the mechanism there?
The mechanism there is the total detachment from objective reality.
How so?
Well, a neurotypical person measures their self-worth against tangible reality.
Yeah.
They study hard, they pass the bar exam, they feel proud of being a lawyer.
Right, that's normal.
The narcissist reverses that process. They internally decide they are the most brilliant legal mind in history, and they expect reality to simply arrange itself to confirm that delusion.
And if it doesn't, like if they fail the bar exam?
If they fail the bar exam, it's not because they didn't study. It's because the examiners are jealous of their genius and the test is flawed.
It's an impenetrable shield against accountability.
Entirely. Which feeds right into the criteria regarding their belief in their absolute uniqueness.
Right, and their staggering sense of entitlement. They genuinely believe they should only associate with high-status people or institutions.
They're the ones screaming at the airline gate agent, demanding the CEO of the airline come down to explain a weather delay.
Because the rules of weather and aviation shouldn't apply to a god.
Exactly. That entitlement is the active expression of the false self interacting with the world. If you are omnipotent, waiting in line is a profound insult.
It is a narcissistic injury.
And to soothe that injury, we see the activation of the next set of criteria, the exploitation and the absolute lack of empathy.
They are interpersonally exploitative. They view people as tools to be used and discarded.
And this is paired with the defining trait of the entire disorder. They are fundamentally unwilling or unable to recognize the feelings and needs of others.
The empathy deficit is really the diagnostic linchpin, isn't it?
It is. A person can be arrogant, they can be entitled, but if they still possess a functioning capacity for effective empathy, if they feel genuine guilt when they cause harm, they do not have narcissistic personality disorder.
So the clinical narcissist views other human beings the way you view a vending machine.
That's a great analogy.
You put the coin in, you expect the soda. If the soda doesn't come out, you don't empathize with the machine's mechanical failure, you kick the machine.
And if someone else gets a soda, the criteria specifically mention envy.
Oh, right. They are constantly envious of others, and they project that by believing everyone is envious of them.
Plus the constant, arrogant, haughty behaviors. Envy is a highly toxic emotion for the narcissist because it violates the premise of the false self.
Because if someone else is successful, happy, or wealthy, it implies that the narcissist is not the absolute center of the universe.
The narcissist must devalue your success to restore their own supremacy. If you buy a new house, they will point out that the neighborhood is declining.
They have to inject poison into your joy.
Exactly.
But let me push back here, or rather, let's play devil's advocate for a listener who might be getting nervous right now.
Sure.
Because looking at this constellation of traits, arrogance, grandiosity, envy, a sense of entitlement, we've all experienced these emotions.
Of course we have.
Everyone has exaggerated a resume. Everyone has felt a pang of bitter envy when a rival gets a promotion. Everyone has had a bad day where they snapped at a barista and lacked empathy in the moment.
Right.
So where is the absolute line between A healthy person having an ego-driven day and a cluster B personality disorder.
It's a vital distinction. What you're describing are narcissistic traits or states.
Okay.
We all have a baseline of healthy narcissism.
Yeah.
It's what allows us to set boundaries, ask for a raise, and protect ourselves.
So what's a dividing one?
The dividing line between a trait and a personality disorder comes down to pervasiveness, rigidity, and the absolute absence of a restorative mechanism.
Meaning, what happens after the bad behavior?
Exactly. If a healthy person with a big ego loses their temper and screams at their spouse, the adrenaline eventually fades. Their reality testing kicks in.
They see the hurt on their spouse's face, cognitive dissonance occurs, guilt arises, and they apologize.
They attempt to restore the bond. The narcissist never experiences the guilt.
Wait, never?
Never. They scream at their spouse, and then they genuinely believe the spouse deserved it for provoking them.
There is no repair mechanism because the false self cannot admit fault.
The reliance on the delusion is compulsive and life or death. It is not a mood they slip into. It is the only operating system they have.
That makes the distinction crystal clear. And the source material notes that this operating system doesn't always look the same on the outside.
No, it manifests in different ways.
It notes that about 75% of diagnosed narcissists are men, though the diagnostic criteria might inherently skew toward recognizing externalized aggressive traits more common in male socialization.
That's a well-documented bias in the field, yes.
But more interestingly, the text breaks down the different flavors or subtypes of the pathology. We have the cerebral narcissist and the somatic narcissist.
The subtypes essentially describe the specific currency the false self uses to buy its supply.
Let's start with the cerebral narcissist.
So the cerebral narcissist trades in intellect. Their false self is constructed around being the ultimate genius, the visionary, the infallible academic or tech mogul.
They view everyone around them as intellectually inferior peasants, basically.
Right. They don't care about their physical appearance. They care about dominating you in a debate or humiliating you with their encyclopedic knowledge.
They are the ones who will corner you at a party and lecture you for 3 hours about obscure geopolitical history.
Completely ignoring the fact that your eyes are glazed over.
Because they aren't having a conversation, they are performing a monologue to an audience of one.
Exactly. Now contrast that with the somatic narcissist.
Right. Somatic means body.
Yes. The somatic narcissist uses the physical body as their currency. They extract supply through physical beauty, fitness, athleticism, or sexual conquest.
Their false self is the ultimate Adonis or Aphrodite.
They spend hours in the gym. They're obsessed with anti-aging procedures.
And they measure their worth entirely by how many heads turn when they walk into a room or how many people they can seduce and then discard.
You know, what's fascinating is that Vaknin notes they can actually switch between these types depending on what is available.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A somatic narcissist who ages and loses their physical beauty might suddenly pivot, read a bunch of philosophy books, and declare themselves a cerebral guru.
The currency changes, but the Ponzi scheme remains exactly the same.
Precisely. And then we have a deeply complex subtype discussed in the literature, the inverted narcissist.
Also known as the covert or vulnerable narcissist. Right?
Often related to that, yes.
This one is mind-bending because on the surface, they look like the exact opposite of a narcissist.
We really do. They present as hyper-empathetic, fragile, anxious, and deeply codependent.
But their pathology is intrinsically linked to the grandiose narcissist.
Yes. The inverted narcissist is fundamentally codependent, but with a highly specific pathological twist. They do not derive supply directly from the world through their own grandiosity.
Where do they get it then?
They derive their supply by proxy. They seek out a classic, grandiose narcissist and attach themselves as the ultimate, indispensable sidekick or martyr.
Oh, wow.
Their false self is built around the delusion that they are the only person who can truly understand, soothe, or endure the genius of the grandiose narcissist.
It's like they are feeding off the exhaust fumes of the primary narcissist.
That's a very vivid way to put it.
They get to feel special and unique because they're sitting next to the king on the throne, even if the king is actively abusing them.
They weaponize their own victimhood. They silently project this aura of, look at how much I suffer for this great person, I must be a saint.
So they are just as rigidly attached to their false self as the grandiose type. It's just a false self of supreme martyrdom rather than supreme dominance.
It is a perfectly interlocking pathology. The grandiose narcissist needs a flawless mirror, and the inverted narcissist wants nothing more than to be a mirror.
But beneath all these presentations, cerebral, somatic, inverted, lies the exact same tragic reality.
The inner landscape is a wasteland.
They are plagued by chronic dysphoria, an ever-present hum of dissatisfaction, depression, and paranoia. They are terrified, every second of every day, of being unmasked.
Hearing the sheer exhaustion of that existence, the paranoia, the constant management of illusions, the trail of destroyed relationships.
The obvious question is, how does a human psyche shatter into this configuration?
Right. Is it genetic? Are they born this way? Or is this manufactured?
Let's really dive into the mechanics of that. The psychoanalytic consensus, which the text relies heavily upon, is that the narcissist is made.
They are forged in the crucible of early childhood.
So the origins of this profound internal void trace back to infancy and early adolescence.
Generally stemming from severe trauma, abuse, or highly inconsistent conditional parenting.
The source material pulls from the heavyweights of psychoanalytic theory to explain this genesis. We have to start with Sigmund Freud.
Because he laid the groundwork with his concept of primary narcissism.
Right. Can you explain primary narcissism?
Freud's theory is foundational here. He posited that every single human being begins life in a state of primary narcissism.
So we're all born narcissists.
In a developmental sense, yes. An infant does not have the neurological capacity to understand that they are a separate entity from their environment or from their mother.
To a newborn, they are the entire universe.
They feel hunger, they cry, and a breast magically appears to feed them. In their developing mind, their cry created the breast.
They are omnipotent. All of their instinctual energy, their libido, is directed inward at themselves.
It's a necessary developmental stage.
Yeah.
But as the child grows, they are supposed to hit the reality principle.
Right. They realize, oh, I didn't create the breast. My mother is a separate person with her own agency. Sometimes she doesn't come immediately when I cry.
And from that realization, they are supposed to transition to object love. They learn to take that internal energy and direct it outward, loving the external object, the parent, as a separate entity.
But for the narcissist, that transition fails.
Freud argued that the clinical narcissist experiences a catastrophic failure in this transition.
Usually due to trauma, neglect, or profound unpredictability from the primary caregivers.
The child learns a terrifying lesson. The outside world is hostile, and the objects are unsafe.
So to invest love in the mother or father is to invite unbearable pain or rejection.
So the child's psyche recoils. It withdraws all that emotional energy back into itself.
The child fundamentally arrests their own emotional development, deciding, I'm the only thing I can trust. I will remain my own universe.
They get stuck in primary narcissism.
Wow. Then we have Otto Kernberg, who came later and shifted the focus toward the sheer rage of the disorder. He operated in the realm of object relations theory.
Kernberg is crucial for understanding the malice of the narcissist. He didn't just see it as a retreat from an unsafe world. He saw it as an active fusion of idealization and rage.
Oral rage, right?
According to Kernberg, the child experiences such severe frustration and deprivation from the cold or abusive parents that they become consumed by oral rage.
And to protect themselves from being destroyed by their own hatred of their parents, the child splits their psyche.
They create a grandiose, pathological false self that is immune to pain, and they project all their rage outward onto the world.
So the narcissist isn't just protecting a fragile core. They are actively operating as a hostile entity, constantly seeking to devalue others to manage their own internal festering aggression.
That explains the sadistic element of the devaluation phase we discussed earlier.
It really does. But to fully understand the tragedy of the disorder, we have to look at the work of Heinz Kohut and self-psychology.
Kohut moved away from Freud's drive theory and Kernberg's rage and focused on the concept of mirroring.
And this is perhaps the most universally applicable framework for understanding how modern parenting can inadvertently create this pathology.
Kohut talks about the child's need for a self-object.
Can you unpack what that means in the context of, say, a toddler running around the house?
Think about a 3-year-old child. They draw a messy stick figure with crayons, they run up to their parent, and they exclaim, "Look what I made. I'm the greatest artist in the world."
This is a moment of healthy, phase-appropriate grandiosity.
The child needs the parent to act as a self-object, an external psychological regulator.
So a healthy parent provides a realistic but unconditional loving mirror. They smile and say, "Wow, that is beautiful. You use so many colors. I love it."
They validate the child's existence and their joy without conferring that they are literally the next Picasso.
They give the child a safe container for their self-esteem to grow into a realistic shape. But what happens in the childhood of a narcissist?
The mirroring fails completely, and it fails in one of two extremes.
What's the first extreme?
Either the parent is cold, depressed, or abusive, and they completely ignore or mocks the child. Get out of my way, that drawing is garbage.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. The child's core self is basically annihilated.
Exactly. Or, and this is equally damaging, the parent uses the child as an extension of their own ego.
So the parent only mirrors the child when the child achieves something that makes the parent look good.
My child is a genius artist. Look at what my genes created.
The child is instrumentalized. They realize, I am not loved for who I am. My true self is worthless. I am only loved when I perform.
So they retreat. They build the false self to execute the performance that guarantees survival.
And because they were so deeply betrayed by the people who are supposed to mirror them, they develop this profound, lifelong repetition compulsion.
The repetition compulsion is the engine driving their adult relationships. Unconsciously, the narcissist is constantly trying to resolve that original childhood trauma.
They split the world into all good or all bad. When they meet a new partner, they project an idealized, flawless image onto them.
They cast the partner in the role of the ultimate rescuer, the perfect parent who will finally provide the unconditional, flawless mirroring they were denied.
But no human being can provide flawless mirroring. We get tired, we get sick, we say the wrong thing.
And the moment the partner fails to read the narcissist's mind perfectly, the moment they miss a line in the script, the narcissist's psyche splits.
The partner is instantly transformed from the all-good rescuer to the all-bad abusive parent.
And then they punish the partner. They unleash decades of repressed Kernbergian rage on this person.
They are literally punishing their spouse for the sins of their mother or father.
Speaking of the parents, the source material makes a very specific note about the family dynamic. Obviously, the mother is often the primary figure in these early developmental theories, representing the enmeshing or depriving object.
But Vaknin highlights the critical, often neglected role of the father in preventing this pathology.
Yes, the father's role is the boundary setter. In healthy development, the father, or the secondary caregiver, acts as an intervening force.
They help pull the child out of the enmeshed, omnipotent dyad with the mother.
They introduce the reality principle. They act as an intellectual catalyst, teaching the child that there is a wider world with rules, limits, and other people's needs.
If the father is absent, weak, or complicit in the abuse, the child remains trapped in the toxic orbit of the primary caregiver.
The boundary is never set, and the grandiose delusion solidifies.
If we synthesize all of this, the Kohut mirroring, the Kernberg rage, the repetition compulsion, it paints a devastating picture.
It really does.
Being in a relationship with a narcissist is literally like being hired as a background actor in a play they wrote in their head when they were 4 years old.
At first, they give you the lead role. You're the hero.
But the script is completely invisible to you, and the moment you naturally improvise or assert your own humanity, the director decides you are trying to destroy the entire production.
They fire you, lock the doors, and set the theater on fire.
And they walk away completely convinced that you started the fire.
It is a closed loop of trauma. The grandiose, terrifying abuser who is ruining your life is, at their absolute core, a terrified, emotionally stunted toddler trapped in an adult's body, desperately trying to survive a war that ended 30 years ago.
Which brings us directly to you, the listener.
This is the crucial part.
If you are listening to this and your heart is beating a little faster because you recognize the pattern, if you have been the victim of this cycle, it is vital to pause here.
Understanding the severe childhood trauma that forged the narcissist, understanding the theories of Freud and Kohut, does not excuse the abuse they inflict. Explanation is not exculpation.
Never. The architecture of a bomb might be scientifically fascinating, but that doesn't mean you should stand next to it when it goes off.
However, understanding the mechanics is the only way to achieve true psychological closure.
Because victims of narcissistic abuse often spend years, sometimes decades, agonizing over what they did wrong.
They replay every argument. They think, if I had just been more patient, if I had just loved them harder, if I hadn't made that one comment, I wouldn't have ruined the relationship.
That is the lingering effect of the gaslighting. But understanding the pathology, knowing that they operate on a rigid, calcified false self that is entirely incapable of real connection, proves that the devaluation was inevitable.
It was pre-programmed. The abuse was never actually about you.
You were just the nearest mirror. You were a prop. And while realizing you were just a prop in someone else's delusion is intensely painful, it is also the key to your freedom.
It means you are not fundamentally defective.
You are simply collateral damage in their endless war with their own void.
Let's pull all these threads together because we have traveled deep into the machinery today.
We really have. We started inside the chilling, confabulating inner monologue of a self-aware narcissist in a prison cell.
We explore the neurological and philosophical realities of habits versus core identity through the lemon experiment, revealing how a personality disorder is fundamentally a paralysis of adaptation.
We deconstructed the myth of narcissists, shifting the paradigm from self-love to the desperate vampiric extraction of narcissistic supply from the environment to feed a holographic false self.
We walk through the clinical reality of the diagnostic criteria, identifying how grandiosity and the absolute absence of empathy manifest in real time.
We looked at the subtypes, the cerebral, the somatic, and the paradoxical inverted narcissist.
And finally, we trace the origins of this void back to the psychoanalytic bedrock, the failures of mirroring, the splitting of the psyche, and the lifelong repetition compulsion that turns romantic partners into punished parental avatars.
So why does all this dense psychological architecture matter to your everyday life?
Because understanding the mechanics of narcissistic supply is your ultimate impenetrable armor.
The narcissist relies entirely on your confusion, your cognitive dissonance, and your emotional reactivity. They need you to believe the illusion.
If you know that their vicious attacks, their grandiose boasting, and their cruel discards are not objective assessments of your worth, but rather compulsive grabs for a reflection in the mirror, you have the power to simply step out of the mirror.
You can refuse the premise, you can refuse to react, you can institute what the survivor community calls the gray rock method.
You become as boring and unreflective as a gray rock.
The moment you stop generating emotional capital, whether it's tears or anger, their Ponzi scheme cannot use you. The power they hold over you instantly evaporates.
But as we close this deep dive, there is a broader systemic context we have to confront, a reality that Vaknin alluded to, which extends far beyond the individual abuser in your life.
He noted, quite astutely, that modern society increasingly serves as the narcissist's accomplice.
Yes, and if you take that a step further and look at the cultural architecture we are building right now, our economic and social systems actively incentivize the creation of the false self.
We measure human worth quite literally in metrics of supply: likes, views, subscriber counts, retweets.
We are financially rewarded for projecting a flawless, heavily filtered, two-dimensional avatar, and we are encouraged to consume other people's avatars as disposable content.
We are adopting the operational mechanics of the pathology as our standard mode of communication.
If empathy requires time, nuance, and the recognition of 3D humanity, the algorithmic internet actively suppresses it in favor of rapid-fire idealization and devaluation.
We cancel people with the same absolute context-free rage that Kernberg described in Toddlers.
Which leaves us with a deeply unsettling question to carry forward.
If our culture is designed to reward grandiosity, punish vulnerability, and relentlessly pursue attention at the expense of authentic human connection, are we inadvertently building a society that mass-produces the exact psychological pathology we've spent this entire time dissecting?
It forces us to examine our own adaptations. Are the habits we are forming online making our personalities more flexible and connected, or are they calcifying into armor?
Think about that the next time you interact with the digital world, the next time you curate your own image, edit out your flaws, and wait for the dopamine hit of the supply rolling in. Are you nurturing your true self, or are you just polishing the armor of a false self? When the diagnostic waters of our culture get this muddy, you have to be vigilant. You have to make absolutely sure you can still tell the difference between a reflection, and reality.